Awesome. Well, thank you for inviting me. Hello, everyone. So I've been building communities now for about 26 years, which is one of a number of indicators that I'm becoming an old man. Um, Started out in open source in the late 90s in the UK, and then I think my first real job was at Canonical, where I led a team that built the Ubuntu community, about 60 million users. We had about 350,000 active contributors who would write code, do docs, translations. We had about 300 local user groups. Then I went to X Prize, where we launched these big incentive competitions. The first X Prize that I helped launch was called the Global Learning X Prize, which was a $15 million competition that challenged teams to build an Android app for a tablet that teaches kids how to read, write, and do arithmetic without a teacher being available. So it was for the 200 million kids around the world who didn't have access to education. And interestingly enough, it was primarily funded by Elon Musk. This is back in 2015. And I went to GitHub and led community there. But when I was at GitHub, I realized, one, didn't really want to work for a bigger company. And two, I love working with like lots of individual companies. I've been consulting on the side for a while, ever since I'd written my first book on community, The Art of Community. So I started consulting and then did that for about 6 or 7 years, worked with a couple of hundred companies, helping them to build communities and do DevRel. And then one of the challenges with with consulting rather, is that you give people information and then they have to take that information and do something with it. And there is a massive gap in between, in that process, right? In people being successful. And I spent years trying to figure out what's the most effective way to kind of break that kind of moat in consulting. And then I realized the consulting model doesn't support that. Like, it's not how it works. So early last year, I launched something called the Community Leadership Core, which is, you can think of us as like personal trainers for how people build communities, where we don't just give people information, but we actually work with people every week, and we have like real accountability baked into it as well. And I'm really thrilled with how CLC has been going. So, yeah. It's a good question. I think it really depends. I'm a big believer in um, you should use a platform where where your target audience is likely to exist and be familiar with that platform. So one of the great benefits of Slack is that it's a lot more well known to a variety of different audiences than something like Discord, which is its closest comparison. So, for example, if you're building a community of executives, CTOs, CEOs, founders, people like that, don't do it on Discord. Founders and execs hate Discord. They find it confusing. They don't particularly like all of the kind of bullying and gamification that's in it. Slack is much more familiar and usable. But if you're building a community of gamers or engineers, then Discord is, definitely a lot more extensible and flexible to you. So I don't think Slack is waning so much. I think that there's always been a big difference between chat platforms and forum style platforms. And there's been a resurgence in forum style platforms with people like Mighty Networks and Buddy Boss, where it's a forum with loads of other stuff packaged in it as well. But forums always struggle with getting people to come back because, you got to remember to go back to that site, and it doesn't have as concrete of a notifications platform as something like Slack or Discord. So I don't really see Slack going anywhere in particular. The thing that will be the big game changer for Slack is if they change the pricing model, because the vast majority of communities that are built on Slack are using their free plan. They're not paying for it because it's just asinine to pay for Slack. It's so absurdly expensive that I don't understand why anybody would reasonably pay for it in a community setting. So yeah, they changed that. It's going to be a big game changer. I mean, I run the Community Leadership Core community on a free Slack, right? Because I'm not paying for it. It's ridiculous. So I pay a little bit, but I'm not paying what they want to pay right now. What they want right now is silly. What a great question. So to me, I'm not sure if I would describe it. I don't think I would view the problem in quite the same way. I don't think of there being a project phase and a product phase. I see them as being two very distinctly different things. Maintainer burnout is a big problem. There's no doubt about it. And it's fundamentally a problem that's anchored around like skills availability. The reason why maintainers are burnt out is because there's just not enough maintainers. And therefore, they shoulder the responsibility to keep the project going because lots of people are depending on it. But they're tired and they're probably anxious and they've got other stuff going on that they may want to do more in, if they've been around the project a long time, they may want to move on and do other things, but they feel, it's kind of like being a parent, right? Like there's still a standing responsibility there. So to me, the way in which we solve maintainer burnout is we make it easier for people to become really good maintainers, right? And to me, that's not just an educational and a training component. That's a mentoring component. Like, how do you find the next generation of maintainers? This is a problem that open source really needs to deal with, is that there's an aging population in some open source projects, especially like some super low level projects like Linux, for example. Like Linux has got a lot of older maintainers, right, which really needs to be fixed. In terms of the product piece, though, what I would recommend is that if you've got a project, is creating a product is something you do that will be parallel with it. And if you can run that product and generate revenue that will then pay the maintainers, then that's great. But it's a completely different mindset in my mind, because as a maintainer with a project, what you're doing is you're creating useful code that the ethos is that it's available to everyone. But by definition, with a product, you have to have some kind of scarcity, right? It will mean that some people will not be able to use that product because they'll have to pay for it. Like, you have to pay for it. And a product often, like, to me, the journey to a product is also like really getting clear on who your ideal customer profile is, and then being maniacal about delivering value to that ideal customer profile. And what you think is that ideal customer profile at the beginning of that journey is very different to what it is, a year later. I'll give you an example with a community leadership call. When we launched it early last year, my view was that our ideal customer profile was going to be community managers who primarily want to get together as a group and learn from each other and have some training available. And I learned that, like, that's actually not what my customers want. What they want is they want like super direct hands-on coaching. They love being in a group setting, but what's more important to them is like getting their work done. So the product radically changed over the course of the year and 3 months, whatever it's been. So and whereas with an open source project, I think it's like we just keep adding functionality, so we can serve a variety of different use cases, not like being laser focused on one. So, I'm not sure, this might sound like a bit of a bummer, that for most open source projects, that it's actually doable to build a product around it with the same set of developers. I think you almost need like another company to come in where they specialize in building that product, but then they carve out money that will go to the maintainers. It's a tricky problem in how maintainers get paid. To me, the way in which we solve maintainers getting paid is maintainers working companies where they are paid to write software that will enable them to be maintainers, right? Like what's happening in the CNCF is a good example. Like most of the code is written by people who work at companies. So I think there's two pieces to this. There is, what is the root cause of the discomfort? And then there is, how do we handle that? So the root cause of the discomfort is that people feel betrayed, right? This is an element in human psychology that we see all over the place, is when somebody feels like there is a dependency on another person or another organization, and then that organization changes how they operate, or that person changes how they operate, or they wrap up that relationship in some way, that triggers betrayal. And betrayal is an ugly feeling in most people. So the reason why this happened is because there was with these licenses, the license is a social and technical contract that dictates how that group of people are going to work together, right? Like if you've got a piece of code that's licensed under the Apache license, say, or under the GPL, there is a certain set of rights there, but that influences the way that community kind of comes together and works. If you then switch that license to kind of one of these kind of business source licenses or whatever, then it radically changes the culture of the project. So people feel like the rug is being pulled out from them. To me, the way in which you solve this problem is you have to bring your community along for the ride and incorporate them in the decision-making process. It doesn't necessarily mean that they get to make the final decision, but you have a conversation. You don't just communicate out a decision, right? So the way I would approach this if I was HashiCorp, for example, is I would kick off a conversation with my most active members in the community, and I'd say, look, we need to have a conversation about how we make this community sustainable, because we're not sustainable right now. And these are the reasons why. And these are some of the different options that we've got available to us. And one of those options is a license change, right? But I want to sit down and have a conversation with our community about it. And some people will be radically against it. And I'd say, okay, well, if you're against this, we'd love to hear your ideas for how we make this sustainable without us changing the license, right? Is that you make your community partially responsible for how we get to the solution. The problem is that a lot of companies, I'm not saying this is HashiCorp, but a lot of companies hire legal people and PR people. And those people are incentivized by risk mitigation. They're not incentivized by innovation. So, when somebody says, yeah, should we have a conversation with the community about it, like a DevRel person or community manager, like, no, that could be disastrous, right? Let's make the decision privately, and then we'll put together the perfectly written PR statement, which is actually complete and utter horse shit. And we'll put it out there and it'll solve the problem. And it doesn't work because, again, you're dealing with betrayal. That's fundamentally what's happening here. So I'm not saying that HashiCorp intentionally betrayed their audience, but the feelings are betrayal. And that's the reason why we need to open up a conversation. And then you may, at the end of that conversation, say, you know what? We appreciate all of the insight and the perspectives, but we're going to make the license change. And if that's the case, people will still be upset, but at least they will feel like they had an opportunity to participate in the process. It's just like politics, right? Like, we may be upset with who is the final government, but we can participate in the process in some way, and that's what makes it different. Yeah, so I don't think there's any fundamental requirement for a project to be open source to build a community around it. There are many examples of products and companies that have built amazing communities. I mean, if you look at Asana and Fitbit, Lego, Harley Davidson, there's lots of examples of it. To me, the fundamental question um, is one, is the product or the project solving an actual problem in the world, and do people like it, right? So you cannot build a community around something that people don't like or that doesn't exist. That's a general rule. There are some weird exceptions. The second thing is, can you pinpoint a pain point that audience has got, where you can come together and we can enrich people with the group's insight. So what makes communities so magical to me, and part of the reason why I'm even more excited than I was when I was 18, when I got started doing this work, is if we just look at the people who are in this session right now, every one of you has got experience and wisdom. We all come from different backgrounds. We all look at the world through a slightly different lens. And when we get all of that out into a shared space where we can consume and learn from each other, it's not only massively rewarding, but it really helps us all get better results. So the question is if you've got a product that is valuable and interesting, and you've got a group of people who are interested in it, if you can identify the pain points that those people have got and you can help them solve problems around those pain points, that's when a community will prosper. And to me, the most important thing at the beginning is identifying what those pain points are. I've seen a lot of people where they start a community and they just say, go and check out our Discord channel, and then it's just dead within days. And the reason why is because it's like Netflix. You wouldn't log on to Netflix unless there was fresh and interesting content that you find interesting, right? Like, the reason why you go to Netflix is not because it's Netflix, it's because the content's there and it's interesting. So that's why we do the pain point analysis, because then that gives us a good indication of what are the discussions, what's the content. I call it the 3 C's: content, conversations, and carrots. So the 3 tight ropes that we walk to kind of get content out there that people can use. And then bit by bit, it will grow. And I think especially when you do this as well, and this is super important, is the power dynamic in most communities is broken. So what happens is, you've got like a founder or a community manager or a DevRel person who's responsible for building the community, and the community members see them as like the person who is kind of in the front of the car, driving the car, and we're all in the back seat kind of following along, and we'll follow your lead. It's the wrong way to do it, because then it creates us in a mentality, and puts your community members into a consumer role, not a creator role. It also makes the community manager, the DevRel person, the founder, responsible for success, and they can't guarantee success, right? This is the biggest challenge with communities. But if you go out there and you say, look, if I'm Kunal, I'm gonna do everything I can to make this community amazing, but I cannot do it without you. And if you don't play a role in this, we won't build something amazing. So I need your feedback, I need your input, I need your honesty, and I need your time. If you're willing to put that in, we'll make this an amazing place for everybody. And I think that's super. If you have those ingredient pain points, power dynamic, and great product or project, and just kind of get out there and get started, then the likelihood of success is much more increased. Yeah. And that's really hard, right? Like it's really hard to kind of to give that up to a certain degree. And I think also communities, and this is an area where I think you're so good at this, Kunal, is communities need like the cheesy way of describing it is an inspirational leader, like, but they need somebody who they believe is bringing us all along for the ride. And I think when you've got somebody who's very open and very receptive to feedback and is very encouraging, then those communities really succeed. If you've got somebody who is like, no, 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 I get to make the decisions and you folks get to follow along, you're not going to get as good results. I think there's a few techniques that will work here. I mean, the most important thing is, like, to me, it's like kind of like a pyramid, right? And the tip of the pyramid, which is the hardest bit for most companies to figure out when they're investing in things, is what is the direct connection to that investment in the company's success, right? So I run a company, right? And if somebody could come up to me and say, if you give me $10,000, I will guarantee you will get 30% more customers. I guarantee it. I would 100% invest that $10,000. Like, it's undeniable, right? So to me, is what is the assurance around that investment impacting the company in some meaningful way? Now, the challenge with education is you can't guarantee that, right? So what we do is we kind of remove the uncertainty from the mix. So I'll give you an example. There's been a big kind of trend towards kind of pre-recorded training courses, right? Like, people, the exciting thing is it's passive income, right? You record the thing once, you put it out there, people go buy it, rich, right? That's how it's supposed to work. But the elephant in the room is that people don't watch pre-recorded training courses. 95% of people who buy them don't watch them. You just go into anyone's dashboard and you'll see the numbers, right? 3-4% of people actually consuming the content in full. The reason why is because it requires discipline to take that material and convert it into action. And the most impactful people in the world are people who commit to action immediately. This has been scientifically proven over and over again. So when you go to management and you say, look, sure, we can have them watch YouTube. YouTube's great. We can have them watch pre-recorded training courses. That's great. But if I talk to people about this at the community leadership course, right? For people to join the community leadership course, it's between $30,000 and $55,000 a year. That's a lot of money. But what I say to these managers is that, look, yeah, you can go watch the pre-recorded training courses, but if we work with your team members every single week, then we can significantly increase the likelihood that what they're learning will manifest in action. In fact, we hold people accountable with action. And then with this, you'll then be able to, generate these benefits, like they'll be able to work more efficiently, they'll get better results, there'll be more consistency, and we have like data to kind of show that. And you'd want to be able to show that as well. But more importantly, what I would recommend you focus on is loss aversion. So I think it's in Thinking Fast and Slow, Kahneman identified that we're much more responsive to not losing things than gaining things. So if you basically say, if we invest in this training or we bring this consultant or whatever it might be, we're much less likely to lose these things that are really valuable to us. That management are much more likely to respond to that as well. So that's how I would approach it. The one thing you shouldn't do is just go on a convincing tour. I know a lot of people who will spend like weeks putting together the world's perfect PowerPoint deck, and it's like a waste of time. They're not going to look at it. So Yeah, what a great question. Thank you. So I'd say two thoughts on this. One is when it comes to kind of prioritization and focus on the most important things, I live my life, I approach this, I've struggled with this for years, and I live my life according to one critical golden rule, which is I should only be working on the things that only I can be doing, right? So if there is something that other people can do and I have the option to delegate, then I should be delegating, right? So for example, we're rebuilding the CLC website. I'm not the only person who can do that. So I've delegated that to my colleague who she's managing the process, and then we've hired an engineer. Um, Now, sometimes you can't delegate. You've got all these things to do, and like, which one of the things that we do the most? The key thing then is you say, okay, what's going to have the largest impact on where I'm trying to get to? And the thing we need to be aware of is the emotional reality that often what will have the biggest impact are the things that we either don't want to do or we're a little bit scared of doing, right? So what we will do is we will do other useful work that's a distraction from the things that we actually need to do. So what I would recommend is like sit down, write all of the things that you need to do on post-it notes, put them on your desk, give them a rating between 1 and 5 and the impact on what you're on your audience, and then stack rank them based upon what's most important. But the things that you don't really want to do, if you're being honest, go and read Atomic Habits and build a habit around it. Like I attach habits to coffee, for example, and that makes them much more accessible. So I think that's the first thing. And then when it comes to work-life balance, to me, the way I evaluate this is like, where are my responsibilities? And then what do I love doing, right? So for example, I have a family, right? I've got a wife and a son, and they're enormously important to me, right? So it's important to me that I spend time with them regularly. They're not just a responsibility, I gain enjoyment from it, right? But I used to beat myself up for years with finding myself working in the evenings and not like playing music and going and hanging out with some of my friends and stuff like that. And then I kind of came to this realization, I really enjoy working. So I stopped kind of beating myself up about it, but also acknowledge like there'll be times when I want to work, but it's very important that I spend 45 minutes just, making, frankly, stupid jokes with my son, because that's really critical as well. So I would evaluate that piece in that lens, right? Like, where are your responsibilities? Maintain those responsibilities, even if you do want to go and do other stuff. And then, if you want to work in the evenings, that's fine. Just do it. What I do to help with that is, for example, when I work in the evenings, I only work in the things that I enjoy doing, right? So stuff that's boring to do with my job, I never do in the evenings. I always do the fun stuff. So it kind of blends a little bit like your job and then the things that you really enjoy in the job as well.